Good afternoon. I'm Darren Lamont, and welcome to Astrovisions Transit Watch, a full moon forecast. Today is September 13th, 2019, and we will be discussing the full moon in Aquarius. I say the full moon in Aquarius because I am a sidereal astrologer. And in this full moon, we're going to talk about the events and things that you could encounter and deal with and experience over the next 2 to 4 weeks. Now, I say 4 weeks because in sidereal astrology, the way I practice it, according to the time that the Aries ingress occurs in April, the lunation closest to that transit into the sun's transit into sidereal Aries has more power than the other lunation. And in this case, the lunation that was closest to the Aries ingress was a full moon. Therefore, full moons for the entirety of this year and up until the last lunation before the next Aries ingress, full moons will have more power than the new moons. So this could last up to 4 weeks. I've experienced this, in fact, the entirety of this year in reading new moons and full moons. So with this particular full moon, this is all full moons, a time of completions, a time of endings, and a time of endings for new beginnings, time of banishing and releasing and letting things go. This is a flirty lunation. Online attractions are possible. Being overly critical is a possibility. Strange occurrences, a potential for violence. Driving defensively is advised. Violent weather is possible. Makeups and breakups. Making new friends. Concerns for children. Law enforcement active and media members may make the news. Happy Venus Day. This is Astrovisions. The moon waxes full today, or early in the morning, 12:32 a.m. on the 14th, over the nation's capital. 9 degrees Gemini will be rising at the time, with Mercury conjunct Venus exact at 5 degrees in the sign of Virgo. For this lunation, the Sun and Mercury are the rulers of this particular chart because the signs because they are transiting the signs they rule. If you have planets from 7 degrees to 10 degrees of the mutable signs, those mutable signs, for those who don't know, would be Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Planets or points at 7 to 10 degrees of any sidereal mutable sign, this particular lunation will be very important to you. Now, this is a tricky period. Gemini is rising, and of course, we all know that Mercury is the trickster of the zodiac, and this has the potential to be a very, very busy time. On one hand, communication and transportation will be key. All right? Communication and transportation will be key. Now, this is not, don't worry, folks, this is nothing like a Mercury retrograde, so we don't have anything to worry about in that respect. However, communication and transportation are big, and you'll see why as I continue. This has the potential to be a very flirty period, with Mercury in an exact conjunction with the planet of love, Venus, in Virgo. Now, while this can be a flirty time, it's not a very romantic time because the Mercury-Venus conjunction does not really favor romance as much as it favors friendship. So this is a period where you can really meet someone new and make friends. Furthermore, this lunar phase is loaded with aspects that can test our faith, that can lead to disappointments, can produce moodiness and violent weather like tropical storms, hurricanes, tornadic winds, fickle behavior. It can also produce discord and in some cases violence. Let's jump right into it. Gemini rising conjunct, Gemini is rising and Mercury is conjunct Venus. This is an alignment that favors harmonious communication, the spirit of compromise and agreement, as well as flirting with attractive people. All right. Now, the sun is in the third house of this chart, amplifying this Gemini energy because Mercury naturally rules the third house. All right. Mercury naturally rules the third house, and the sun is there conjunct Mars. We will talk about that as we continue. All right. At 5 degrees Virgo, this conjunction occurs in the Virgo decan and the Libra dwad of Virgo, favoring new relationships. I'm sorry, favoring new friendships, which could lead to new relationships. Ladies, this is a period where you can shoot your shot if you are single. Now, this is particularly if you desire companionship. Just so you know, the degree of the ascendant is also a Virgo dwad. So it's very possible that people can be too discriminating, too critical, and overlook someone that has potential down the road. So don't be too critical. Don't be too hard on the person that you meet. Now, because this is a Gemini, because Gemini is rising and Mercury rules this chart, there is the potential for a chatty Cathy-like energy. This is an easy time for you to meet someone new and strike up a conversation with new people that you encounter. Okay? Just remember, avoid being too critical. Nobody's perfect, not even the Virgo. This transit favors writing, making phone calls, getting caught up on correspondence, paying bills. For those of us who are creative writers like poets, this transit of Mercury and Venus can be ideal for you, you know, however brief it might be. Take advantage of take advantage of this energy and stitch words together in a beautiful artistic style to get your point across. Mercury and Venus can sometimes indicate an announcement of new relationships, such as engagements or even marriages. Okay, so there's somebody we know who has been talking to someone over a short period of time, maybe a long period of time, and they may now announce that they are an item. We might also see in the news celebrities announcing that they are engaged or getting married, or just announce that they are an item. Okay, as with many transits, especially during a full moon, an announcement of a celebrity divorce or a celebrity separation, or just a separation in general, is possible. Okay. The same in the first quarter moon following the new moon on the 30th. The first quarter moon was the 5th of September. The same indication was here, and I believe on the 7th or the 8th, Todd and Sarah Palin announced a breakup, and they've been married for a while. Now, if we don't know who Sarah Palin is, she was the woman. She was the woman who ran for vice president. She was appointed a vice presidential candidate with John McCain running against Barack Obama several years back. Now, if you are in a relationship and things have been a little stale, this is a time when you can make headway with gentle conversation and approach the problem that you might be having in this relationship from a factual, reasonable, and a logical perspective. With all of this airy energy and this fire energy, it's unlikely, because of the lack of overall water in the predominance of this chart, that we will react in a emotional way. So talking about things that could be emotional in a logical, reasonable way, focusing on the facts, is favored now with this energy, with Mercury especially in Virgo. Okay, now failure to approach this period correctly can set the stage for the Venus-Saturn square that forms around the 21st during the third quarter moon. And when that occurs, if the problem has gotten worse in the relationship, then this Venus-Saturn square will cause a what I like to call a reassessment of that relationship. This is a time when when Venus and Saturn, when they align, um, relationships are regulated. Okay, so do your due diligence now to talk about the problems. Now, if the problems are big and you've been dealing with this thing since the last square, or even since the conjunction earlier in this year, then this particular square may set the stage for the next conjunction at the end of the year, which would result in a parting of ways. Okay. Now, with the chart ruler Mercury in the fourth house of this full moon chart, issues concerning the nurturing parent can come to the surface. If you and your mom have been at odds with one another, this transit can mark a period of reconciliation, or a period where a separation is coming. Both reconciling is possible, but both parties will need to admit the error of their own ways. Now, it is very possible, because of Mercury in Virgo and Venus in her fall in Virgo, that one of the parties would refuse to see the error of their own ways, but will clearly be able to point out the eyelash that's hanging in your eye, but they won't see the beam that's sitting before their own face. And that can cause problems. Uh, that can cause big, excuse me, that can cause big problems down the road. Okay, so with this energy going on, one person may point the finger and refuse to acknowledge that they played a role in whatever the problem is. Now, in a lot of cases with some of my clients, it's been the mother, it's been mom who has refused to acknowledge that she's wrong, and the daughters are leaving moms alone. Okay, if this is you, I'm sad that this is going on for you, but sometimes these things are necessary for growth, for your own personal growth. Okay. Now we got the sun in Leo right now, so maybe one party is a narcissist, and you have to deal with that narcissism. So do your best. Do your best, and if separating yourself from your nurturing parent or mom, if you are the one who needs to separate yourself from daughter, then it's everything happens for a reason. Do so and move on. Now, on a mundane level, things that we could see in the news behind the Gemini rising. Gemini rising in this particular chart is the fifth house of the April 13th, 2019 Aries ingress chart. Okay, the fifth house corresponds to our children, entertainment, entertainment venues like stadiums, arenas, amusement parks, public parks, places of art, and the theater. And it also corresponds with speculation, like speculative ventures like the stock market, investment in real estate and commodities. The fifth house also represents or corresponds with public schools, particularly elementary and middle schools, as well as high society, and it also rules the birth rate. Now, with that said, and with Gemini being a mutable planet, Gemini being a mutable sign, we can expect the stock market to continue with wild gyrations. What I mean by that is, on one day, we can see several days in the black, where 20, 30, 40, 50 points, 100 points, 200 points to the good, followed by near panic and red number days where it's minus 50, minus 100, minus 200, 300 or worse. And this would be due to bad news in the media and emotional reactions by the investors. This is a fickle and unstable energy and a very changeable time, okay? During this period, investors are prone to being reactionary. Now, there could be good news in the trade war, which could result in the stock market challenging all-time highs. This happened a few months ago, and here it is again. Possible that we could see the stock market soar to new highs, but then hit a wall and turn right back around and take away those gains because something else occurs that causes a panic in the market. All right. Now, in the August 15th edition of Astrovisions on Facebook, I told you either the United States or China would blink in this trade war. Perhaps it happens in this month. Venus and Mercury in the fourth house does favor good news in trade. So let's see what happens. On some level, people will behave irrationally and could put innocent women and children in harm's way. This has been a brutal summer for children in terms of children being in danger, particularly in St. Louis. 29 children have suffered injuries or death due to gunfire. 29 children under the age of 14. All right. The last two lunations, the full moon in August, followed by the new moon at the end of August, which is technically a dark moon, and I'll tell you about how that works in the next new moon cycle towards the end of this month. However, the point is, those two lunations, the full moon and the new moon, both had strong indications of danger for children because Mars was rising in both lunations. Mars is still active because Mars is transiting right now with the Sun. And this leads us to the third house. The third house has the Sun and Mars transiting there. And before we get to the part with the children, we'll talk about how this may affect you. Okay? The Sun in the third house favors strong decision making, taking charge, starting new projects like an online venture, repairing that old car, or repairing a lawnmower that's been sitting in the garage that needs work, undertaking an activity that requires great physical exertion. If you are a martial artist, or if you are a boxer, or you're working in perhaps you're even into the UFC style fighting. This month is a month where you could actually make great gains in terms of the working on your hand speed, okay? Because the third house rules the hands, okay? Mars rules combat, all right? So this is a great time to work on your hand speed. Or if you need quick hands for anything, pianists, this is a great time to work on your skills, you know? Moving fast up and down the keyboards. Horn players as well. Anything that requires speed with the hand, this is a great time to take advantage of this particular energy. You got 2 weeks. During this cycle, determination can be high, and we can be filled with a lot of energy, both to communicate and to do things on a physical level. Failing to focus can result in us scattering our energies and accomplishing very little, and then leaving a bunch of unfinished things to clutter up our life that we need to finish down the road. So there's something that you need to work on. Get busy, bucko. This is a great transit to use willpower to discard bad habits, as the moon, full moon, favors letting go things that are no longer useful for us, okay? Egos may be strong now, plus with Mars in the Mars Decan and the Taurus Dwad of Leo, because of our ego, we can get ourselves in trouble with a toxic combination of an air of superiority, the Sun and the Moon together, or Sun and Mars together, as well as a strong ego drive and pure stubbornness and a determination to do things as you see fit. So if you vibrate on that kind of energy, you can find yourself in some sort of conflict, all right? So just know that that is a possibility. Now, if you know members of law enforcement on a personal level, tell them to be extra careful when driving. You know, they have the tendency to disobey traffic rules. With Mars in the third house, Mars ruling police officers, law enforcement in general, also first responders like firemen and ambulance workers, and even tow truck drivers. They tend to do things that, more so the police officers than the others, they tend to drive in ways that the rest of us will get locked up for, all right? Or at the very least, at the very least, we would get tickets for. Well, under this particular transit, especially with the opposition to Neptune and the moon across the houses of transportation, the third and the ninth houses, police officers should be very careful in how they drive, because they could be in an accident and be the cause of someone losing their life, or they could cause the loss of their own life, being careless, reckless, and arrogant behind the wheel. So if you know a police officer, warn him. Just be safe when you're driving and obey the traffic rules that you enforce. All right? In other mundane aspects for this alignment, as I just said, Mars is indicative of police officers, and the third house is indicative of short trips, roads, highways, and byways of America. I advise you, avoid conflict with law enforcement, particularly through this weekend and through the following weekend. This weekend is the full moon. The following weekend is the third quarter moon, or when the moon is square the sun. It is these two alignments, the opposition and the square, that things happen. All right? I would hate to learn that one of my listeners, one of my fans, one of my clients had a unfortunate conflict with authority. Nor would it surprise me if some lippy citizen pissed off one of the boys in blue, and we see video floating around next week going viral of a police officer behaving badly. Let's not provoke these people, guys, all right? Police officers, be on your best behavior. This is a volatile time. This is a very volatile time. It wasn't long ago here in St. Louis, in fact, not long ago, a young man was pulled over for whatever reason. The police officer approached the young man's car, and he was sitting there with some weed in his lap. Weed in his lap. Now, this is a part of the Mars-Neptune opposition. The police officer is represented by Mars, and the weed is Neptune. This young man lost his life. The police officer, for whatever reason, panicked and shot the man dead. He jumped the gun. We don't need that. We don't need any more of that crap, but it's very possible during this lunation. Now, with the Sun and Mars in the third house of this chart, it further supports the notion of children being harmed. Gun violence in this country is out of control. Okay, and with the third house here indicating, with Mars here in the third house, Mars represents guns. The third house speaks to children on a certain level. Please, please safeguard your weapons. A 3-year-old just yesterday was in the news, killed because some careless gun owner left his gun in reach of this curious child, and now someone is without their precious 3-year-old toddler. Okay? Let's do all we can to avoid this. Now, other things that could occur related to this third house. There could be a tragic situation because the third house represents elementary schools, much like the fifth house represents public schools, and Mars here in the third house. There is the possibility, folks, I hate to say it, but there is the possibility of another school shooting before this month is out. Now, because the moon and Neptune are in the ninth house of this chart, this could happen on a college campus. It could also happen in a church, but it could certainly happen in an elementary school or a middle school or even a high school. So let's protect our children by giving them some self-defense knowledge. Look out for people who are dressed out of the weather. If you see a man with a long trench coat and it's 75, 80 degrees outside, it's hot outside, draw attention to that person. You see someone walking around with a long gun near a school, near a shopping center, near a store, near a big box store. Draw attention to this person and then go for safety. This is a crazy time, and anything can happen, especially during the full moon. We might also hear, because the third house rules the post office, we could hear someone going postal during this period. All right. We haven't heard that in a while, and the going postal is something that is a term that was coined in the 70s, and we heard about it a lot in the 80s and 90s, where some disgruntled postal worker goes to work and shoots up the post office. We could hear something along those lines as well. It would not surprise me to hear of a crime related to the post office in general. There could be something like wire fraud reported during this lunation. Okay, with the opposition to Neptune, a train, a shipping accident, or a trucking accident could occur, which could include a poisonous chemical being spilled and putting a school or children in danger. Now, something like this happened earlier in the week. I believe it was on Tuesday in a southern Illinois town called DuPont. A 14-car train derailed just as this lunation was forming. A train derailed in DuPont, Illinois, and spilled a chemical, a solvent. But fortunately, the solvent was not poisonous. They did evacuate a nearby elementary school just for safety precautions. All right. Now, other indications here is that an oil tanker could spill its cargo at sea, or a barge on the river, seeing as how the moon represents rivers and Neptune represents the oceans, and the square from Neptune and the moon to Jupiter also can represent the seas and the oceans. Therefore, we could hear of the news. We could hear of news of an oil spill, or perhaps even nuclear waste for whatever reason being spilled into an ocean or the sea during this lunation. Okay. Also, guys, be safe. Be very careful when moving about train tracks. Okay. Do not chase. Do not chase the signal. If you come up on a train track and the arm goes down, pay attention to that. Okay, pay attention to that. We don't need anybody dying due to a train accident. The Sun conjunct Mars also suggests great criticism of the President of the United States in the media. What's new there? That's been going on since before he became president. However, this period could be different. Something he has already done, or something that he may do this weekend, today, tomorrow, next week, may open him up to a verbal attack in the media that we've not seen the likes of before. This would be no surprise, and because he's been doing this, has been going on anyway. It would not be a surprise, but it still could happen. Okay. Now, there could be something that he does that causes people who were in his corner to jump off his bandwagon. The last three lunations, this one included, all signified the president losing support or popularity. Okay, so we could hear in the news someone who was staunchly in his corner now going away from him for whatever reason. There could be charges of libel or slander or defamation of character levied upon a member of the mainstream media. That has happened already twice this week. On Tuesday, OOAN, a cable right-wing leaning news organization, filed defamation charges against MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. And then yesterday, the lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, filed defamation charges against CBS. We could hear more of that in the coming days and weeks. I would not be surprised to hear of another charge along these lines that comes from either the president himself or one of his children, aimed at the media in some way. This Mars-Sun conjunction also suggests there could be a physical attack on the president, or perhaps his motorcade, or even Air Force One. Now, this is only an indication. It's possible, but doubtful. I just don't know that this is going to happen. It could very well happen. And if it does, we may or may not know about it. I did see a clip of the president riding through Baltimore yesterday, and Looky Lou standing out there flipping him the bird. Perhaps that's the extent of it, but there could be more in the coming days and weeks. Let's see what happens. Okay? Now, this could also manifest as a governor, senator, or congressperson, or even a head of state abroad getting attacked physically. We'll see how that plays out over the course of the next couple of weeks. To continue with this third house theme, we could hear of a prominent writer, journalist, or author, or member of the media losing their life. This could be transportation related, but there could also be a suicide or an accidental overdose. None of these things are out of the question. Also, a famed educator could transition during this period. Okay? Mars is the ruler of infectious diseases, and infectious diseases could make the news in some way over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks. The third house in general, with Gemini rising and corresponding to the lungs, we could see growing concerns over issues with the lungs. Now, what's in the news right now is the overreaction of people having lung issues concerning vaping. Now, people have been dying of lung cancer for decades behind cigarettes and tobacco, but we've had a handful of people suffering from lung ailments with vaping, and the media is losing its mind over this. And there's already legislation running through Congress to ban vaping on a certain level. This is a complete overreaction. But with that said, issues with the lungs could occur because of a chemical spill that I spoke of before, or it could just be more of this issue with the vaping. All right, this vaping thing could reach a critical mass during this period. Finally, on this third house issue, I would not be surprised to see POTUS visit a school or a post office or some other third house related business. An in-studio visit or an in-studio interview on Fox News would not be out of the question here. All right, that wraps up the third house. On to the sixth house. In the sixth house, Jupiter transits here in Mars-ruled Scorpio, and Jupiter is still locked into a square aspect with Neptune. Jupiter here generally is not strong, and under the rulership of Mars and in a square to Neptune, this challenging transit will perfect on the 21st of September, and this is also the day of the third quarter moon. All right, so this Jupiter Neptune transit will continue on, and it will peak during this cycle. Over the next several weeks, events could transpire that challenges people's belief systems. Some may learn that a long-held belief that they thought was true turns out to be wrong. Perhaps you begin to question your own beliefs in some way.